listening to the Eclectrocasts podcast. This is podcast number 30, featuring pianist, jazz, and electronic performer-composer Reggy Woods. Los Angeles-based musician Reggy Woods spent an hour with Eclectrocasts discussing his history, his approach to composition and playing, and also managed to whet our appetite for his upcoming album called Colors. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us in yet another installment of Eclectrocasts. This is Jeff, and I'm here with Case. Hello, Case. Good afternoon.
Howdy.
Howdy. And we're really delighted to have pianist-composer Reggy Woods with us for this installment of Eclectrocasts. Hello, Reggy. How are you?
I'm great, Jeff. Case, what's going on?
Yeah. Hey. How are things in LA?
Things are great. Things are hot. But, things are good.
It's always hot.
Yeah, see, that's the thing about LA heat. That the humid heat is worse than the...
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we get in New York.
Yeah, New York. I know about New York summers as well.
So. That's right.
That's for sure.
Hey, Reggie, do you have any idea how excited Jeff and I are to have you on the Eclectrocast? We've been trying for a year, man.
It has been a while.
And, and we're just so thrilled. It's exciting.
You are our first jazz artist to be on Eclectrocast.
Oh, I feel honored for that, for sure.
Thank you so much. Our prior guest in the summer, Pete Tazio, who records under the name Culture Trust, has actually a master's in jazz guitar. And you'll hear some jazz chords in his music, but he doesn't really come across as a jazz musician. But you are our first, jazz musician, real deal jazz musician to be on the show. So
it makes me feel great. So thank you.
Hey, I've seen some. I've seen quite a number of your YouTube videos, and where you sometimes show some of your live gigs, and I like the way your fingers dance over the keyboard. You're one of those piano players that. It's almost like your hands are dancing. How did you develop that style of playing?
That's a great question. Like you said, I do like the McCoy Tyners and that style of him dancing around the changes, the chordal patterns that he would use. Were very, I guess, influential in my early days of playing piano. So I guess I still use that technique today.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So when were your early days?
Early days. I actually started piano very late. So my first real instrument was at drums. So I played drums when I was from about 10 to about 18. And I started really, really working on piano when I was about 20. So those were the early days. I was really getting into John Coltrane and McCoy Tyner and hearing Wynton Kelly with Miles and Reggie Arlen with Miles, Those are my early listening days. So, nice, great memories.
So, you have any formal training? Are you self-taught?
I started off self-taught for sure. As a drummer, I had a great experience because growing up as a drummer, my father is actually an organist pianist. So, we grew up playing together in church as kids. So, I would sit behind him on the drums and. I will be kind of watching him, and I guess it kind of stuck with me because that's after I started getting into piano. I already kind of had that. I can already, see what he was doing, and I already had it kind of in my ear, so it kind of came out. Those were the early days with piano. Still kind of feels like early days if I think about it because it kind of started. Later than the normal, pianist would start, but I've enjoyed the ride.
But you're very free on the keyboard. You don't seem to be stuck to a particular area of it. Your hands move very freely, and it's almost like every time you play is an exploration. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like when you start playing, either by yourself or with others, how do you get into it?
Absolutely. My first experience with piano was playing solo. I would find a piano and just explore. So that's for sure a huge aspect to my jazz playing and as well as my writing. this exploration of just sound, whether you're sitting in your studio or sitting at your piano or at your guitar or wherever your instrument is. Mm-hmm. Just explore the sound. Start something, start from anywhere and continue to explore it. Uh-huh. I did actually, as you stated earlier, I did have some formal training after I started playing by ear. I wanted to get that classical jazz technique under my belt. If that makes sense. Uh-huh. I started from the ground level, and I started playing Bach conventions and started, looking out the fake books and going through all the jazz tunes. And that, along with, just sitting down and exploring, I guess, really gel together to make what I have now. So
yeah. Right.
Yeah. Hey, Reggie, what were some of your first memories of music? When do you remember the first time or an early time when you were a kid when you heard music, and what sort of impact did it make on you?
First memories would have to be from my parents. My father was a musician and my mother was a vocalist. So they always had music playing in the house, whether it was gospel or R&B, the old great records from the 70s, It seemed like everything made in the 70s was fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, those are awesome first memories. But from a listening standpoint, I immediately always wanted to do something. I wanted to play an instrument to do the music and not just, experience it by ear. So,
yeah.
So one of the things that strikes me, how you get yourself in a groove, is in several of the tunes that you asked us to listen to and that we're going to play in this podcast, there is like often one note that just keeps going through the whole piece. And it's like that one note is your guide. It is like something you weave around and come back to. Can you talk a little bit about, how you use like a single note and then how you play off of that?
Of course. I love that, I guess you can say, kind of minimalistic approach. It also kind of reminds me of like a small motif, a small cell of information that someone like Bartok would use, start with a small melody and then just kind of explore it. Uh-huh. So with some of the pieces that we listen to and that I shared with you, focusing around that one note, growing from that note, going back to that note, that's always very intriguing, whether it's writing or playing.
So like, you asked us to listen to The Knowledge from the equal-titled album, The Knowledge. Mm-hmm. That's an album you put out in 2015, last year, I believe.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And that's an example. The other thing in that track is that, it's a 4/4 track, but on your piano, you don't play 4/4. You play... What do you do? It's like rhythmically so neat and, the count is a 4 count, right? But
right.
So what do you do there, Reggie?
That again, I think comes from listening to a lot of minimalistic piano music. Uh-huh. There's a great Dutch composer, Simeon ten Holt, who
not familiar.
Yeah, he starts with something like that, and he'll explore like an ostinato or something, and grow from it harmonically, and ideas will grow from it as well. And the main thing, as you said, is like the rhythm. Like that's like the main things that you can mess with, I guess.
Right.
to stretch your piece out and put the listener in all kinds of different modes and moods. So I guess that's happening. Those different polyrhythms are happening on top of the knowledge, for sure.
Is that the drummer in you that sort of that sort of penetrates the piano player?
Probably so. So. Yeah. Knowing where one is at all time, right?
Where does the drummer begin and where does the pianist end?
Knowing where one is, but ignoring the hell out of it. Who cares?
Ignoring him, right. Exactly. Yeah,
Reggie,
sure.
I like the knowledge, and what I really couple things caught my ear about the knowledge that I really enjoyed. First of all, I love the droning underneath. There's this drone tone underneath that moves just in small intervals, and it makes such a really tense atmosphere. And then I think that you have that beautiful melodic approach on the piano. I know you're a jazz pianist and name dropping, I guess, but it reminded me of Herbie Nichols. I don't know if you know the work of Herbie Nichols, but how he had that dancing sort of, in a way, almost kind of like a, what you would get in a Bach invention, or what you'd get in a Bach that circular motion sort of thing. And I think that contrast between that beautiful tense drone and that more melodic line that you're doing, or lines that you're doing on the piano, really made a great atmosphere. And I think a lot of us who will listen to that will find that too. It hits you right here. Case, did you find that as well?
Yeah. I also the gradual buildup in that track, and then it sort of climaxes in the cymbal at the end, and then and then fades out, but the whole track, the energy just keeps building. And I think I think the two elements that we talked about earlier is that one note guide, right? That's throughout all of it, which anchors the tune and which allows you to dance really, and the other element that allows you to dance with your fingers is your sense of rhythm, the playing around the 4 count.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Why the title The Knowledge, Reggie? Why the title The Knowledge? What were you going for there?
It's a title that just kind of came from the drone, the repeated patterns over and over. It just kind of seemed to be kind of speaking in a way that was just kind of driving something in. The ostinato over and over. And then build, and then the fade was like a story, and then ending.
Yeah.
Kind of saying,
you carry it with you. You carry it with you like knowledge. Yeah.
So let's listen to it, and what I want to do when we come back is I'd love to talk about your concept of electroacoustic music.
Okay.
All right. That's what you on all your websites and your sites, that's what you say you do. And that's really been grabbing my attention. And I think a lot of the people that listen to our podcasts have an interest in this, interface of analog and digital music. So Jeff, why don't you take us to The Knowledge?
So last year's album, The Knowledge, is the title track from Reggy Woods. You can find this on Bandcamp. This is called The Knowledge here on Eclectrocasts. Excellent.
Yeah.
Case, why don't you start off talking about what we ended with there?
You know, I listened to all of your albums, all 5 that were on Bandcamp, and you've got some more in store that we'll talk about a little later. And it seems like you almost live in 2 worlds. You have your jazz trio, you have your solo jazz work, and then you have what you term as electroacoustic. So what is electroacoustic, and what's your interest in it, and how did you get into that?
My interest in electroacoustic music came probably from college, from studying composition in my last bachelor's here in LA. That professor had a particular niche for, I guess you can call modern classical. So we explored a lot of piano preparation and cello, through digital type of exploration, which you hear a lot on the knowledge as well. So it came from those guys. It came from, composers, Pierre Boulez and a couple of the French modern school. Yeah. Thank you. That was that style of composition is interesting to me because it seems to give a lot of space for improvisation. I guess that's why I term those tunes that way, and why I tend to work in that field.
So you play the cello?
I taught myself the cello a little. I taught myself the cello. I've been teaching myself the cello, and I have a teacher now. But for the first 3 years, just playing around with it and trying to record sounds with it, and doing anything, hitting it with stuff and recording, plucking strings, and doing whatever I could just to get a nice sample or something like that. I did start getting more recently into learning it more professionally because I teach now, so I have to kind of know a little bit about it. The students are saying, "Mr. Reggie, can you teach us cello?"
You're a music teacher?
I do teach music, yes, absolutely. I teach piano, I teach music theory now, and all types of things to the kids.
What grades, Reggie? What grades do you? What ages?
I would say 6 to like 20.
Wow, good.
Yeah,
good
it's
deal.
fun.
So,
it's new for me.
this is at a music school, or is it at a center?
It's like it's music center, right? Like a young arts center, which is
awesome, man.
Which is great because it's for community involved, community supported.
Well,
awesome.
The first thing that goes in schools, K-12 schools, is art, right? When the budget is tight. Yeah. So so having these community centers with music and art is just going to be so vital.
It's a shame that they leave it for after, because after school there's so many other things that kids could do.
Right.
But of course, we need to keep the arts there. That's important.
You bet.
Yeah, it has to be an option. It has to be an option for those kids who don't really like sports or whatever the case is.
Right.
Absolutely.
But do you treat that cello? I mean, you said like you sort of started learning how to prepare a piano differently for playing. Do you do anything like that with the cello as well, or do you put a contact mic on it, or what do you do with a cello? You say you hit it.
I have recorded it with a contact mic. I have kind of played mallets on the side of it to kind of create deep sound using the resonance of the instrument. I guess exploration in the cello was more in that way, more in playing it. I have used a little bit of digital exploration, like I was saying, but most of those techniques I haven't really explored fully. So I want to wait, kind of continue to study more of it before I really delve in. But the little bit that's there, the little bit I know, I always usually use in a track of mine or something. So
you sent us a track called Sandstorm from your album Odyssey. Also 2015 release. And that, to me, gives a very clear picture of what I think you mean with electroacoustic. There's some very plucky instruments on there. Can you talk a little bit about what you use to... And it's also a decidedly Eastern feel to it. And I almost started to hear, the Spanish gypsy singing. But anyway, can you talk a little bit about the instruments that you used and how you treated them, or are they all digital instruments?
Sandstorm, the main instrument is the prepared piano. Prepared that with popsicle sticks, something inside the strings, and plucking those, created that really percussive. Almost, I think you were saying it was like a
thumb drum.
A thumb,
Yeah.
exactly. And I have one of those as well. But Sandstorm, for sure, piano is main instrument in that piece, and I love doing that actually, because that, like you were saying, was the main reason for me wanting to explore the electroacoustic world. The piano is my instrument for sure. So anything I can do with that, I want to do to it. And I don't have the reserved classical upbringing. I started the piano by exploring it in that way.
Right.
So
It blows me away, man. I would have never in my lifetime guessed that you did that on the piano.
yes,
Wow.
for sure.
Wow, that's really cool.
Thank you.
I thought it was notable. You had your hi-hat and rim shot going throughout the track, and it just kept going and going and going. No matter what else was happening, that was laying down the law. I'm like, what were you trying to say? I mean, it was almost like a countdown. It was like a clock,
Wow. Yeah. Maybe that again is a drummer in me,
Yeah.
But that clock analogy is great because the Sandstorm kind of happens in the middle in that piece,
Right.
I think.
Yep. Yeah. About 3.5 minutes in. Yeah.
Right. So, and I know it keeps going, but still,
All right.
tick-tock to that, and then it can keep going through.
Yeah. Why don't we take a listen to that? From Reggie's album Odyssey, this is a track called Sandstorm on Eclectrocasts.
So Reggie, one of the things that strikes me about your work is you work with space in very deliberate ways. A very deliberate panning of instruments, which, you know, you spoke earlier about the music of the 70s, and in the 70s, their idea of stereo is very different than a modern idea of stereo, right? They really, their idea was to split out all the instruments so you could hear them separately. And it seems like you work with that. You want the clarity of all of the different instrumentation, but yet they work together, and it creates a very interesting listening space. Can you talk a little bit about your use of panning and creating space with your music?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think the use of space comes from me kind of seeing, like, as some cases, a sort of visual, you know, sort of story, especially in something like Sandstorm, that clearly is a journey. With the idea of stereo, I kind of see and hear instruments in certain areas, you know, in the mind's eye, in mind's ear, whatever you want to say. That guides me, you know, into where to pan it, where to kind of put it, you know, in the stereo, in the mix. The space, I think, is something that we hear the most in music. We realize when it's not there in music. You know?
It's dead.
So yeah. So that's definitely something that I love to work with.
Very nice.
Hey, Reggie, coming from a like a church music background, and then getting into jazz. I don't know if you were into jazz drummers as you got into your teens. Probably you were, because I can tell the way you speak about jazz so reverently. It's been a part of your life for a very long time, and it's been
Tony
important
Williams.
Yeah.
I was going to say Elvin Jones, but okay, fine. Are there any electronic musicians that you listen to kind of help you create that space, or to, I always, it's so funny. Case was a jazz progressive rock guitar player, right? I was a jazz rock guitar player. You were a drummer, and Case and I did not find electronic music at first. Some people these days, like some of our fellow musicians that we correspond with, started making electronic music, and that was the first thing they did, right? How did you come to electronics, and what did you listen to kind of move you that way? I know you talked about minimalist and French modernist composers and things like that, and all that's great because Case and I like that too. But where do you get your electronic sensibility?
I came to it late, as you guys did. I guess I can think of maybe two major influences as in electronic music. One would be Radiohead, Tom York, and Johnny Woods' work, and the other one is a techno composer named Christian Vogel, who lives in Germany, or he lives in Denmark now. Those are two electronic composers that I still listen to today. Christian Vogel has an incredible sense of like creating like dance rhythms with really deep space and deep music in general. And with the Radiohead music has kind of been all over the spectrum and hitting different types of genres and stuff, and that's always kind of fed me as well growing up. I think that was probably one of the first bands I heard that wasn't jazz. That I liked, and I think a lot of cats were starting to get into that style of music around that time because we could play it in a jazz idiom, in a jazz.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
those are two major electronic influences.
Yeah, fascinating. Sure. You mentioned on your Bandcamp site that you studied in New York and Amsterdam and London and Hamburg, and could you, if you wouldn't mind, talking briefly about any of the circumstances behind those travels, and what did you take away from those places musically?
Oh, absolutely. One of the first things I did in music was, when I started studying, was to go travel. When I moved to New York, the thing we were doing was doing a jazz program in our school, and also doing the same thing in Amsterdam in the summers. So I was there every summer when I wasn't in school, and it was my first trip abroad. I mean, you guys know Amsterdam, first trip abroad, and that was a huge mind opener. So musically and culturally, it was a great experience, and it was something that I tend to see throughout Europe when I explored. I went to Germany and and lived there for a while. And I was in London studying a little bit as well, just living, not really even really worried about music necessarily, but taking in the culture, taking in the people and the music, of course, listening to the music, not necessarily playing it myself, listening to it. Yeah, I would definitely take nothing away from those travels. Also, one of my first professional gigs was as a cruise ship pianist. So traveled many places, many places I never even think about doing that. And, that was also hugely inspirational.
Hey, you got a new album coming up, right? I think it's called Colors That Sing and Shake.
That's
now,
right.
That's a lot more ambient in nature. Can you talk a little bit about that? That's not. I mean, there's no jazz piano in there. At least a couple of things that I heard.
Yeah, it is a little bit more focused on ambient and electroacoustic mixes. I think for the most part, I tried to keep those worlds separate a little, but I don't think it really worked, because whenever I end up playing a piano on a track, my piano style tends to just come out and maybe overtake it more than I want.
You can't fight that.
But right. But I do like and love working with the textures and just the overall timbres and sounds of electronic or acoustic, digital, analog, whatever it may be.
And I think you also use field recordings in that, right? And
field recordings as well, yeah. Just starting to get into that in the past maybe 6 months, 8 months or so. So it's been a great new way to learn and explore.
Yeah, that's something that I've gotten really attracted to. Jeff and I used to play in bands together, and there's a drummer in the band, so you're really not having that much to say about rhythm. But I find that in a lot of field recordings, there is all this natural rhythm. And so I was intrigued to talking about, using field recordings. Now, you shared the track Colors with us, which I assume is going to be on that album.
Yes.
You have it on Bandcamp as a preview for people. Can you talk a little bit about Colors and what you try to accomplish with that track?
Sure. Colors is the first release from that record I put on Bandcamp and I think SoundCloud as well for a listen. The focus of it goes a little bit back to the knowledge with the ostinato and the pattern and the drone underneath kind of carrying it through. But also because of the space, because of the noise involved, I guess if you want to call it noise, it creates certain colors in my mind, or my mind's eye, mind's ear, like we said. So I think from that point of view, from that piece, the whole record tended to lean towards creating some type of texture, some type of color, and shaking it up and giving it a groove, or giving it a little piano, and just continue to explore just the textures and the sounds is my number one thing.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed about Colors, and it comes up on a couple of your other tracks too, Colors is compositionally like a mountain. It really is. I see and hear landscapes of layers in there. And I felt a kinship with that too, Reggie, because I compose in layers as well. I'll take a melodic idea and keep building on it and riff on it and throw it to another instrument and maybe change it to a minor sort of thing for a section and then back and what are your feelings on building compositions from sound? The compositions from sound, you're using melody, harmony, and rhythm, but you're not doing it in a verse chorus sort of manner. You're building as you go, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen so many things, and not only in music, but also in films and also in life, how things they don't have that intro, verse, chorus setup. It's this is where we start, and then we build, and then boom, it's over. Or vice versa. You start, and then it just gradually falls off. That comes from experiencing, like we were talking about previously, just life in different countries and life in different ways that you're just not used to, and hearing things growing up that were opposite of what you heard growing up or something. And composition, like you were saying, building in layers like that is very intriguing because it gives you and the listener an opportunity to grow with the piece.
Absolutely.
And to not, it's like what made Beethoven so successful. He used to throw something in there that the listener was not expecting, like a complete opposite, and still continue to make it great.
In this type of track like Colors, you don't jam pack your melodic lines, and you actually are very patient sometimes to add a new element. You leave pauses or you leave spaces hanging, which is kind of contrary to your piano work, where your fingers just keep dancing, which I think is absolutely lovely. I love your trio work, man. It is really phenomenal.
Oh, thank you so much.
But you, and particularly in solo work with a piano, you really, you're really dancing more than painting. Whereas with Colors, and it's an appropriate title for that reason too, you're more painting, with sound, and you're not necessarily, like Jeff said, working on each layer all the time, but they sort of come and go. How do you avoid layered music becoming overwhelming or muddled, or like all the different layers each add to the color? How does it, if you add too much stuff together, it always turns into some sort of a muddy red brown, right? How do you avoid getting to that musically?
Maybe from keeping some type of compositional structure. You do want to build in layers, of course, but you also use your compositional side of your brain to kind of say, okay, let's structure it this way, and then make the layers seem as if it was chorus, verse, song. But that's important in Colors. And painting, like you said, is a good analogy, because as I was saying, I like to try to keep those worlds separate if I can. So my piano playing and my jazz playing is like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. I try. It doesn't really work, and I probably shouldn't be trying to separate them. Just let them just mesh together.
Maybe in the future, and I'm not trying. We've tried to encourage guests in two directions before, but maybe in the future there will be a new thing happening when they come together fruitfully for you. And I think when you investigate, when you're exploring something new, it's probably a good idea to not try to blend it or marry it with something existing too quickly, to really come to know it for yourself.
Right. I've definitely been feeling that. Like I've been saying, definitely trying to study that and only that and do that, and keep the world separate so that I can get the most out of it.
Right. It's like knowing the rules before you break them, sort of thing. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Hey, why don't we listen to Colors from the upcoming album? Yeah,
why don't we listen to Colors? This is from Reggy's upcoming album. This is a track called Colors here on Eclectrocasts. Now, I know that a number of our listeners are going to want to go to your Bandcamp site and buy as many releases of yours as possible.
Nice.
But if I could recommend any of them, and I like all of them, but Beneath the Surface, really, where the lead track is Uncertain Undercurrents. We're going to talk about that. But you also have an extended sound exploration called How Deep is the Ocean?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
that's right.
How Wide is the Sky? And another track that I absolutely adored called The Noise Factory.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I thought it was such a great little EP that you had there. What were you trying to go for with Beneath the Surface?
That was definitely an exploration into more digital and rhythmic sounds. It has a little bit of a dark tinge to it. Like the rest of the tracks and like everything else, really, it's still about the journey. The Uncertain Undercurrents is highly percussive. It has hidden melodies and little pieces of sounds coming in where you don't really hear or really even maybe want them to come. But
it's very oceanic, in fact.
Yes. It's a team sends to kind of give you, fathoms of opportunities. Those three tracks, I think, represent as much of a split as I could from the jazz worlds and the electroacoustic worlds. Because I think right before that record, I've been studying a lot of synthesis and getting into different computer manipulation tools, like Super Collider and stuff like that. Renoise, learning how to program and code little things here and there. Add sound design to different pieces. So those three tracks, I think, represent that. Just starting to head in that direction.
So I love those sudden plucks. I assume now that those might be popsicle sticks in the piano.
Right. Absolutely.
Paper clips.
That's it.
Man, dude, they shook me, like, because they're like powerful. They jolt the listener.
Oh man, we need to do that more in the jazz world. And pluck one of those jazz trio or something. See what happens.
Yeah. Like sort of like unsmooth jazz.
There you go. Oh, I would love.
Then you'd end up selling even less records.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, exactly.
But the people who hear it would love it.
No, but
I heard like a little. I heard almost a gamelan melodic sort of thing in Uncertain Undercurrents.
Absolutely.
At the end of that track, the plucky sounds very briefly go into a regular sort of a Rhodes piano, and then the song fades out. Oh man, you had me longing for more. Why did you stop that?
I'm happy you caught that, guys.
Oh, that was such a gorgeous transition, and I'm like, oh, please go on.
Yeah. I love that about music. There's something that can leave you wanting more, and you still like the tracks for some reason. This is
right.
He wanted you to go to the next track, which is How Deep is the Ocean on the EP. So you'll continue it there.
Okay.
All right. Well, Reggie, you gig around, it seems, frequently, regularly, and you sometimes do solo work, like on cruise ships, we've learned. But like in a restaurant, you may have a solo gig, or you play with a drummer, or you play with your trio, and you sometimes even play with larger groups. What does gigging around do for you, and how does that play into your music? I know you have a live album, which is a solo music, right? Mm-hmm. It's you on piano. A wonderful album, by the way. Everybody should get that one too. But how does the playing live feed into your art, into your work?
One of the main things about jazz for me is playing out and playing with other musicians and playing in your community. And I think it's a must. I think all musicians must play out and explore their instrument in that way and with other musicians and for someone. But I don't think I've made $1 in LA that hasn't been for music. So, I do gigs, and I have 2 trios. I have an acoustic trio, and I have kind of a funkier electronic where I play, Nords and left-hand bass. So work with both of those bands, and also, other bands will, give me a call to play as a sideman. I love doing their projects as well. Anytime I can play my instrument, I'm always there, and that also feeds into my compositional process, and of course we meet other musicians, and they feed into your compositional process, and then your life as a musician and life as a whole is better. So
improvisation is the center of your work. And I don't know if that's true, but it seems to me that that's at the heart of almost anything you do. And then, from the improvisation, your compositions may become more deliberate, but it is all grounded in improvisation. Now, the thing about live is that, mistakes are there. There's no removing them, or there's no doing it again. So how do you deal with that? Like how does improvisation roll into your live work?
Oh, that's a great question. I think as an improviser, any jazz musician, I think, has that sort of space inside them where they can dump the brain activity away and just improvise. That's important to me as in life and in music, because sometimes you need to just be able to just say, okay, forget all the music that I've learned. I just want to play. And just sit down after a long day and just play. And many people wish they could do something like that, but they can't. So as musicians, we should always take advantage of something like that. As far as improvisation, that's definitely a different mindset, I guess, because some musicians love to do it. Some musicians would love to do it, or like to know how to do it. I grew up, like we talked about, I grew up improvising kind of from day one. Just sitting down at the piano and finding out where things were. So that is a huge part of my live playing and a huge part of my compositions, because I feel that it's such a great part of music that shouldn't be ignored. The improvisational factor that most musicians should be able to just make something on their instrument and have it be beautiful. So.
And like a lot of people think that improvisation is not composing, but it is.
It's instant composition.
Right.
And it is, and as such, it is like people think that composition is something, linear. It's not at all. It's searching. And when Jeff and I were playing in bands together, we called it jamming. We just started playing together, and out of that playing together, songs emerged, little pieces. All of a sudden, we were looking at each other, and we knew we found something.
Yeah.
But it is that searching that leads to it. The only thing is you just don't know where you're going.
Exactly.
That's the cool thing.
That's the great thing about it. I mean, my favorite pianist, maybe one of my favorite pianists, is Keith Jarrett. Right? Actually, probably one of my favorite first records as well was the Keith Jarrett Corner concert. Starting from zero, right? Absolute zero, and going somewhere or going nowhere. Just at the same time, it's an improvisation. It's an instant composition that you're kind of involved with as it goes along, and that's hugely important.
Hey, Reggie, you've probably heard over the years, Miles Davis mentioned a number of times how he didn't want jazz to be a museum piece. You know what I mean? He wanted jazz to grow. And as he changed the face of jazz 4 or 5 times throughout his life.
Right.
Where do you think jazz is today? Do you think it's healthy and vibrant? Or do you think, what's your conception of where jazz is today?
I think where jazz is in a great place. I think it's really down to the attitude of the players. Whoever calls himself, a jazz player or a jazz musician can't necessarily be, I don't know, how do you say, jazz purist, jazz snob in a way. You can't really be stuck in this particular era of jazz and call that era jazz, because that kind of destroys the definition of jazz just in itself. So jazz has always been a music that growed, always that was constantly organically doing something, you know. So evolving. So the players have to have that same attitude, and when all the players have that same attitude, then the music will continue to organically grow, and all the things that we're talking about and doing now with the electroacoustic influence and the prepared piano influence or cello, even, you know, all that kind of stuff. I hope to be a part of that jazz idiom someday, and not necessarily just, you know, someone up there blowing on a saxophone, which definitely should not ever be taken away. But that's.
Yeah, but, you know, how far can you go playing repertory pieces?
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
I mean, you know, Blue Note was Blue Note.
Right.
You know, and Prestige was Prestige. And if you look at jazz as solely being something that was captured in the mid to late 40s through the end of the 60s, you know, as its high point of artistic, you know, blah, 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 then you've stifled it. Yeah.
And I think this is why I was so interested in exploring the idea of electroacoustic, because I think you're onto something, Reggie. I think you're going in a direction that is fresh and uniquely you and beautiful, and so I'm very excited about what you're doing. And that's why we were so eager to talk to you. Is you know, you're not imitating anything. You are giving expression to your life and to your living. And it's just a thing of beauty.
Oh, thank you so much. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to give expression and give music to that. So thank you so much to both of you guys. Thank you so much.
Well, it gives us great joy, really does. Yeah. And you know, just as a recognition of your contribution, and so it's been just awesome hanging with you for about an hour, talking with you.
Absolutely. This has been great.
Listening to your music, which I will do for a long time to come.
I hope so. Thank you.
So, Reggie, did you want to tell us anything else about your new album? Once again, where can people find your new album coming out on the 17th of October?
Yes, absolutely. The new album will be out on Spotify and Bandcamp. Colors That Sing and Shake. I hope everyone loves it. It's going to be full of textures, electroacoustic goodness, and jazz piano.
All right, man.
Can't wait for it. So we're going to ride out on Uncertain Undercurrents. Reggy Woods, been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being here, spending time with us. I appreciate it. I know Case does too.
Thanks.
Yes. Peace.
Peace. Yeah. Case, Jeff.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.